The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Al Blumkin on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm here with my good friend David Nemec, and we're going to discuss the Hall of Fame as it regards to deadball players, whether some that are in don't belong, and whether some that are not in belong. So I hope you enjoy it, and we'll try to do the best we can to hopefully educate you a little bit. Thank you. Hi, David.
Hi, Al. Pleasure to be with you once again.
So we're going to cover the Deadball Era, and since that's one of your areas of expertise, not so much mine, we can. I'll throw out some names at you, and you tell me whether you think they belong.
Well, maybe we should first set what we mean by the Deadball Era.
Okay.
For me, it begins in 1903 when both leagues are now playing by the same rules, particularly the foul strike rule, which makes a big difference in batting averages, and extends through 1919. When Babe Ruth really starts to come into his own. By the following year, of course, he's hitting 50-some home runs, and 1919 he had 29, and that pretty much brought the dead ball to a crashing end. In 1920, they eliminated. They threw out the spitball except for grandfathering in, I think, 10 pitchers or so. And it became more of a hitter's game.
Yeah, that's what the Emery ball. That's what the Emery ball and shine ball and some other trick pitches along with the spitball.
Yeah. So from 1903 to 1919 era, that's 17. It's 17 years, and in those 17 years, the game really changed dramatically. It was a throwback almost to the 1880s, and we reached something like it in the 1960s. Only there was much more power in the 1960s than there was in the Deadball Era. So we really, Al's idea of throwing out some names and talking about them is a very good one, because there are a lot of guys who've been dismissed probably eternally, whom we will end up talking about here today. Go ahead, Al. Why don't you throw a couple out?
Ed Ruleback.
Ed Ruleback, he had some terrific years with the Cubs, and the Cubs were a very good team. And certainly on the basis of his prime years, he could be a Hall of Famer. The thing about the Deadball Era is that it took a lot out of pitchers, with a couple of remarkable exceptions. Walter Johnson, Christy Mathewson, and Grover Cleveland Alexander all glided through. Well, Mathewson didn't make it all the way through, but glided through a fair part of it, continuing to win big every year, pile up a lot of innings, not get injured, and have fairly lengthy careers. The other guys like Ruleback didn't. Their arms started to go, and I think it was because of the intensity with which they had to bear down on almost every hitter. If a guy got on base and got to second base, he's in scoring position, and one run oftentimes could win a game. There were a lot of 1-0 games, 2-1, 3-2. So these guys had to be sharp, and they were pitching, remember, a full 9 innings. Relief pitching did exist to an extent. Three-Finger Brown was actually a very good guy to bring in the 8th or 9th inning for the Cubs. But by and large, guys like Ruleback were expected to go 9 innings every time they went out there, and as a result, their careers were curtailed. But definitely a case could be made for him, but probably a strong case could be made for guys like Dizzy Dean, who won less than 200 games too, and a number of pitchers since. Throw another one out, Al.
Okay, Doc White.
Another similar case, very similar, both with Chicago teams. White and Rubaugh faced each other in the 1906 World Series. Again, White had a fairly lengthy career, but fell short of winning 200 games. There was nothing really about him that once he left baseball, he was pretty well forgotten within 10 years or so. And Rubaugh set a couple records, a couple very remarkable records for pitching both ends of a doubleheader and stuff like that. That stood out, but White really didn't. White had a length. Didn't he have a long shutout streak? Innings of shutout.
Yeah,
that was he did, and that stood out, but never enough to put him over the hump and get him into serious Hall of Fame consideration. But another very, very good pitcher, and it's interesting that between 1903 and 1919. Every pitcher who won 200 games in that era, except one, is in the Hall of Fame. And I can make a good case, and I think... No, actually...
No, I know, he's the one, right?
No, he's not the one. The guy who won 214 games between 1903 and 1919. That was George Mullen with the Tigers.
Oh, yeah.
He's almost a totally forgotten name today. But he was with good teams. That helped him a lot to pile up a lot of wins. But he never got the credit for it that he deserved. And you could find a comparable pitcher in somebody like Jack Morris. Jack Morris eventually did make the Hall of Fame. And he had some of his best years with the Tigers. And Mullen had some very fine years with the Tigers and pitched for a fairly long time, and really has never gotten any serious Hall of Fame attention. And neither have any of the other Tigers pitchers. They had Wild Bill Donovan, they had Ed Summers, they had a number, and George Dowse eventually, but Dowse pitched into the 20s. Nobody's ever made a case for any of these guys really to be in the Hall of Fame, but they had some excellent years. Their careers, in the case of all except Mullins, were not very long. They ran into arm trouble, lost their effectiveness. But there were quite a few good pitchers that we've pretty well forgotten today.
Yeah, it's funny.
And some of the Hall of...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You go ahead. Okay.
Well, I was just going to say that some of the guys who did make the Hall of Fame, I don't think were as good as Mullen. They happened to pitch for very good teams. Guys with the A's in particular, Eddie Plank was a good pitcher, but I don't know that he was a spectacular pitcher. Chief Bender the same, good pitcher, had some good years, but he also had some very bad years. And they both made the Hall of Fame quite easily.
Yeah, the one that bothers me most is Rube Marquardt.
Yeah.
Well, I think has no business being in there.
No, he doesn't. He had that long winning streak, and pitching for the Giants under John McGraw meant a lot. Did pitch on some pennant winners.
He was 201 and 177 lifetime, which is nothing special. Really nothing special, except he had a couple good years, but by and large he was a journeyman pitcher throughout most of his career, and he was considered very promising when he was young, and I think they paid a lot of money for him. They paid $11,000.
Yeah,
whatever it was,
a huge sum at that
time was a huge sum.
Yeah, it was the equivalent of about
But I just want to say that the more I look at Alexander's first 7 years with the Phillies, and the fact that he pitched in Baker Bowl, which was hit his paradise. Those numbers he put up are just basically unbelievable.
They are.
And that's why I rate him ahead of Mathewson.
I do too. And Johnson was pitching with rotten teams. I think Johnson and Alexander may have been the two best pitchers of all time.
Yeah, anytime somebody on Facebook puts up a picture of Walter Johnson, I put down GOAT, which has become the abbreviation for greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was striking out people when nobody was striking out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you're right.
Yeah, it was just incredible the years he put up with those some of those very bad Washington teams.
Yeah, and they both had lengthy careers. They overlapped eras. They went into the 20s and the lively ball era, and they were still winning. They were still winning 20 games, even though Alexander was hampered by severe alcoholism.
But he picked up after World War One. Yeah.
He did. Until the time he went into. You're right. Until the time he went into the Army, I think he was headed for. He could have even been headed for, at least 450, maybe even 500 wins, if he'd been allowed to just, pitch out his career normally and not, get over baked by alcohol. But he was very good, very, very good. And there were some other good pitchers who flashed through very quickly. Bean Gregg started out his career winning 20 games 3 years in a row for Cleveland, but long careers were not the norm in that era.
Pirates had Lefty LaField and Howie Kamnitz, who were effective for a short period of time. What do you think of Babe Adams?
Babe Adams had a very, very long career, and he had a lot of years where he stumbled, he got hurt, he was ineffective, but the Pirates stuck with him. And then suddenly in the 20s, when the lively ball came into existence, Adams began to blossom. He was one of the more effective pitchers in the early 20s, after being almost all but dormant throughout many of the teen years. An interesting pitcher, and an interesting case could be made for him for, Hall of Fame consideration too.
But you and I realize that a lot of this will never happen.
No,
because of the way the Hall of Fame is set up. Okay,
yeah.
What about off pitching for a little bit? Sherry McGee.
Yeah, the hitters suffered accordingly. They weren't hitting for high averages mostly, with the exception of people like Cobb, Joe Jackson. Wagner had some good years. Lajoie still had some good years left. Speaker and Collins, these guys were head and shoulders above most of the other guys in terms of batting average. And there were only two players who compiled 2,000 or more hits between 1903 and 1919 who aren't in the Hall of Fame. And one, as Al has suggested, is Sherry McGee, who did win a batting title, I believe, in 1910. Had some very, very good years, but started slipping by the time he was in his early 30s. McGee, his health wasn't the best. I think he had epilepsy. He was suspended for a year or not a year, but for part of a season for punching an umpire, I believe in 1911, and never really got the attention he deserved because he played in Philadelphia on pretty weak teams, and when Philadelphia won the pennant in 1915. it was his misfortune to have played with Philadelphia in 1914 and then get traded to the Braves in 1915. The Braves won the pennant in 1914 and Phillies won in 15, so he missed out on both. He was with the Reds in 1919 when they won, but he was a very marginal player by then. Bench strength didn't really add anything to the pennant-winning team, and really wasn't a factor in the 1919 series at all. That was his last year.
Excuse me.
But the only other guy to compile as many as 2,000 hits was Hal Chase. And
oh God!
No one's ever made a case for Hal Chase to make the Hall of Fame, but Chase was a very, very good player.
He's also a fixer.
Yeah. Everything about the guy.
Yeah, books have been written about him and how he, used his ability or misused his ability. He was always after the main chance, and teams, when he was cut from some teams, some other team would pick him up. Even McGraw did that.
McGraw ended his career with the Giants, and he was never banned from baseball. He managed to always stay somehow just below the radar. And there was never he was elusive, and they could never really build a case against him. Never really, there's never any absolute certainty that he threw games or that. And he even, he was the Yankees who were then the Highlanders even hired him as a manager for a while, a player manager. He ended up winning a batting title in 1916 with the Reds. The first player ever to bat right and through left to officially won a batting title. And he won a home run crown in the Federal League in 1915. So,
but basically, the game at the time was run by that three-man commission, which was discontinued after 1919. I know.
And they really didn't throw anybody out.
No.
I mean, they Van Johnson, Gary Herman, and
whoever was the president of the National League.
Heidler. Heidler. There were a lot of accusations that were bandied about that, such as that the 1914 A's threw the World Series, that the 1918 series, the Cubs threw it, and both teams tried to throw it in 1917, and there's all kinds of stuff like that went on. How true any of it is, we'll probably never be able to establish. But
a number of the 14 A's, as far as I can remember, went to the Federal League.
They did, and or else
Mac wouldn't pay them again.
Yeah, Mac wouldn't pay them enough. Home run Bakers, just shut down completely for a year. And, Collins wanted a trade and got it. He went to the White Sox. Chief Bender jumped to the Federal League. Plank jumped to the Federal League. The A's were decimated, and they went from 1914, a very strong team in the early teens, to the worst team in baseball history for an extended period of time, beginning in 1915. They were just awful. And, talk about Hall of Famers, or the lack of them. The A's were really riddled with just miserable players, guys who wouldn't even have made it in the top minors at the time.
There's a book I have that came out a couple of years ago, As Bad as It Gets, and it's a day-by-day account of the 1916 A's who won 36 games.
Yeah.
And lost 117. And one of the ironic things about that is that Billy Meyer, who later managed the 42 and 112 Pirates in 1952, was a catcher on the 1916 A's.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah, it's sad to think about it, but you know, a lot of guys got caught up into that, and their careers were permanently blemished just for being part of the team. The A's did have a couple of very good players, even during the time when they were still pretty miserable. They had, you know, outfielder like Amos Strunk was a good ball player, and Wally Shang. A case can be made that Wally Shang was probably the best catcher of his era, but he played for pretty miserable teams until he ended up on the Yankees finally in the 1920s. But Shang was, you know, for offense was definitely the best catcher in the game all during the teens. He's never gotten serious Hall of Fame consideration. I've never even heard his name mentioned. But if you look at his overall record, he definitely, considering the fact that he was a catcher, and catchers at that time rarely caught even 100 games a season, let alone 160 or whatever. So, but his overall stats really stand up very well in comparison to other catchers of his era.
Hey, how about Gabby Cravath?
Gabby Cravath is kind of like Chuck Klein.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah,
it is. And what's interesting is that Chuck Klein was a left-handed hitter, so could easily avail himself of the short porch in right field at the Baker Bowl. But Gabby Cravath was a right-handed hitter, and there was one season, I believe, it might have been 1915, when he had 20-some homers, that he hit all his homers in the Baker Bowl. Cravath learned to hit to right field, developed that skill, and it served him very well. He not only hit pretty well at the Baker Bowl, he also hit pretty well on the road. He didn't hit the long ball on the road, but he kept his average up, got his share of extra base hits, and was really one of the best ball players of that era. His misfortune was he was buried in the minors for a fairly long time until the Phillies finally gave him a real shot at a full-time big league job. And he had, you know, came up in 12, I think, finally returned. And he, throughout 1919, he had a very, very productive half season. In 1920, he was strictly a pinch hitter. And that was pretty much it. But he played deep into his 30s. He may have even turned 40. And if he just had that chance earlier in his career, I think he would have been a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah, because I've looked at Chuck Klein's splits, and he was such a Baker Bowl hitter. And then when he was traded to the Cubs after 1933, he fell off quite a bit. Then they shipped him back to the Phillies. And he had the tremendous hits stats in Baker Bowl, and then mid-1938, when they moved from Baker Bowl to Shibe Park, which was known at the time, he fell off again.
Yeah, but there were some mitigating circumstances in Klein's case. I mean, he did, when he went to the Cubs, he really tried to show that he was everything that, he was, that he seemed to be with the Phillies, and he ended up pulling a hamstring pretty badly and trying to play through it, and he never really did recover from that injury. He was continually that hamstring remained a problem for the rest of his career. That and the fact that the Cubs lost faith in him very quickly and traded him back to the Phillies. And Klein also had a tremendous alcohol problem, so that by the time he was in his early 30s, he was already playing out of shape most of the time. And
Stuffy McGinnis,
compiled great numbers, a lot of hits, a lot of years, hit around 300 a lot of times, but no power. And he ended up playing on most of those terrible MAC teams. He remained the first baseman. Nobody else really wanted him. He did end up playing through 25 or so.
He was on the Pirates 1925 World Championship team.
World Championship team, yeah. The last member of the, I think the 1914 A's to be on a pennant-winning team. Because Collins never was on a pennant winner after 1919.
Yeah, well, Collins, the A's gave him a big contract to stay out of the Federal League, and when he went to the White Sox, that contract went with him, and that's one of the reasons that a lot of some of the players on the White Sox hated his guts.
They did, yeah, they did. I don't think Collins was a terribly likable guy, even on the A's teams, and the strong A's teams. He was very, not a well-liked general manager was with the
Red Sox, yeah.
Red Sox, and he wasn't well liked. The players didn't like him. They didn't like dealing with him. So it's. I think he was called Cocky Collins, and there was a reason for it. And he was well educated, college boy, played under an assumed name when he first came up. But definitely a great ball player, fine second baseman, and nobody's ever raised any complaint about him being in the Hall of Fame.
No.
Whereas some of the other guys in the Hall of Fame. You can look at there are guys in the Deadball Era who compare very, very well to guys who are in the Hall of Fame. One is Jake Daubert, who wasn't a terrific first baseman, but he won 2 batting titles. He hit over 300 a number of times. Played until he died after a botched surgery.
Appendectomy, from my understanding.
Yeah, and he. You could compare him very favorably to another Jake, Beckley, who did make the Hall of Fame. Beckley had better overall numbers. He played longer, but he had some terrible seasons mixed in there. And Daubert too had some bad seasons deep into the Deadball Era, but it's comparable. And then there's Harry Davis, who won 4 consecutive home run titles, and Harry Davis, to me, was a much better guy for Hall of Fame consideration than somebody like George Kelly.
Kelly was put in by Fresh. All those guys were put in by Fresh.
Yeah, and Mac could have touted Davis if he, but I don't think he ever. I don't know that Mac ever touted any of his players for the Hall of Fame. I think he was pretty sour on a lot of them by the time he got into his 70s and 80s. And, but there were, and there's, excuse me, there was another guy, Tommy Leach, who had a long career, a very productive career, but a dead ball career. He did lead the league in home runs once, I think, with 6.
With 6, yeah.
And that's, but he was a solid third baseman, good outfielder. Played on some good Pirates teams. A guy like that, if had come along 15 years later, 20 years later, would have been certainly the equivalent, if not much better, than Freddie Lindstrom.
Well, Lindstrom is very, very. There's another one put in by Fresh, who really doesn't have any business being in there. What about Sam Lever?
Good pitcher, a very good pitcher, and Deacon Phillippe too. They're 2 very good pitchers on those Pirates teams. Neither has ever gotten the acclaim they deserve. Lever was injured in 1903 and couldn't pitch in his first series, but Deacon did. And he won. I think he had a.
He won 3 games. Yeah, I think he pitched in 5. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he
5
lost
of the 8
2,
games.
like 3-2. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was pretty much the whole pitching staff in the series. They got Roaring Bill Kennedy that made one start, and Lever was hurt. I don't remember who the other starts went to, but yeah, they were good pitchers throughout the first decade with the Pirates, and but you mentioned Kamnitz and
Leachfield
too. Yeah, and they were both good.
Yeah,
but none of them.
Yeah, go ahead.
They didn't win. None of them won 200 games. None of them won 30 games. I think Lever had his rookie season. He had a really outstanding rookie season with a very poor team. I think he probably figured in around 55 decisions or so. I can't remember exactly what his record was, but I think he won and lost 20.
Their all-time leading winner is Wilbur Cooper, who last pitched for them in 1924, but he swung over into the 20s. Most of his career was in the 20s. And another one I want to bring up was Larry Doyle.
Yeah. Doyle was an excellent second baseman throughout the teens with the Giants, and it's puzzled me that he never got more attention than he did. I don't think he's ever got any mention for Hall of Fame.
Maybe he didn't get along with Frisch.
Well, I don't even know if Frisch knew him because he was gone by.
Yeah.
I think 20 was his last season.
Man, one of the ones that always.
Frisch did know him. Frisch did know him because Frisch was on the Giants.
Yeah, one of the ones that always comes up in these types of discussions are Smokey Joe Wood.
Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me, I'm really having coffee.
Yeah.
But Smokey Joe wrecked his arm, unfortunately, but really a fine all-around player. After his pitching career ended, he still had a few good years as an outfielder with Cleveland.
He was the buddy of Speaker,
Yeah, they were the Red Sox. The Red Sox really put together a fine team when Wood had his big season.
Yeah. What about Bill Dineen?
Bill Dineen, to me, is a slam dunk Hall of Famer. The guy not only won 3 games in the 1903 World Series for the winning team, the very first World Series, but he had a fine pitching career. And then he had a terrific career as an umpire. He was the home plate umpire in the very first All-Star game, which demonstrates really what was thought of him as an umpire. And he may have been the best umpire even of his day, but he'd never gotten any Hall of Fame consideration. And when there was a chance to put someone like him in the Hall of Fame, those who voted that year for 3 candidates decided to put Hank O'Day in instead. And it was an unbelievable choice. Dineen was so much more of a contributor than O'Day ever was, that it's a shame because Dineen will never make the Hall of Fame now. And
a lot of these people who decide this stuff have absolutely no idea about almost all these players.
No, they didn't. O'Day umpired in the Merkle game.
I know that. Yeah, he was the one who made the call. Yeah,
he made the call, and he was a decent umpire. He made some egregious mistakes. There were a lot of games that ended up forfeited because he made poor decisions, handled them poorly. And Dineen, I don't think Dineen was ever involved in a forfeited game. At least I can't recall any. And he was respected as an umpire, respected as a pitcher. He really had an unblemished career in baseball, and somehow it's totally forgotten today. It's a shame.
Yeah, there's also, I know there's a controversy about Bill Dolan, whether he belongs in the 1890s or the Deadball era, but there's an awful lot of people out there who think that he should be a slam dunk.
He should. He should. He belongs in both eras, indeed. He was still, a good, solid shortstop in the Deadball era, and he overlapped in both. And there's another guy here, Leif Cross, who had a long career.
Yeah, one of his problems. He's with the 1899 Spiders.
That wasn't a misfortune, but he ended up getting out of it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, he got finished up with the St. Louis team.
Oh, Dineen, these guys have to be better than Bobby Wallace.
They were. But Wallace had a long career and knew Ricky pretty well. We played with Ricky with the Browns, and I think Ricky was instrumental in getting him into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, there's nothing about his career that really stands out except his longevity. He was a good ball player, there's no question of that, and one of the better shortstops. But once the 90s, were history, by the early 1900s, his averages were slipping down pretty dramatically.
Yeah, and I want to, because we're running out of time here, I want to discuss the Black Sox. And to me, there were three sure Hall of Famers. If that didn't happen, and of course Jackson is one of them, Seacott is the second, and Buck Weaver is the third. Buck Weaver is the 1 year in the 1920 hit 333 the first year of the lively ball. I think had Felch and Claude Williams not had their careers ended so abruptly, might have piled up those kinds of numbers, but we'll never know.
We'll never know is right. Yeah, Weaver and Felch were both very good ball players. Yeah, it was a good team. It was a good.
Claude Williams was an excellent pitcher. That he was also kicked out. Yeah, but he wasn't around long enough. Seacott, I believe, had 210 wins when he was barred after 1920. Yeah,
he did. He was a very good pitcher throughout the teens. And if he hadn't been caught in the scandal, probably would be. I think he would be in the Hall of Fame. Jackson definitely, of course, would have made it. But
there are still people who believe that Jackson, should be cleared and be on the ballot because he, But Jackson, the problem was that he was, he was limited. And I read more biography of him by an author named Dave Fleitz, who I've seen at the SABR conventions quite often. And he said that he wrote in the book that both Connie Mack and William Somers on the Indians gave Jackson the chance to become literate. And he said no.
Huh.
Yeah. But, it's one of baseball's tragedies, but there are a few of them. So anyway, we're running out of time. I want to thank you very much for this. It's been extremely educational.
No, it's been enjoyable for me, too.
Yeah, and I wish some of these people who vote in the Hall of Fame would be aware of some of these guys because they deserve it. It's like that, it's almost like the Negro Leagues when nobody knows anything anymore. Okay.
No, they don't. They put a whole slew of them in 1 year, and that's as much far as it went.
Yeah. So again, it's a pleasure, and we continue this series. We'll pick up on the what they call the golden era, the 20s and maybe 30s the next time.
Okay.
Okay, appreciate it very much, and you really, really are the expert on this particular era.
Thank you. I really
okay, take care. I'll speak to you soon.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.